What's the most bizarre or interesting fact you know that sounds fake, but is actually true? 10.999. 2e2e2e. This repeating decimal is a numeral that represents the smallest number no less than every number in the sequence 0.9, 0.99, 0.999, that is, the supremum of this sequence. When this number is equal to 1. In other words, 0.999 is not almost exactly or very, very nearly but not quite 1, rather, 0.999, and 1 represent exactly the same number. There are many ways of showing this equality, from intuitive arguments to mathematically rigorous proofs. My grandmother was born in 1918 in the United States, a natural-born citizen, lived her entire life in the US, was registered to vote for as long as I knew her and was able active voter, but the first presidential election she was eligible to vote in was 2008. My grandfather became a US citizen at the age of 2, lived his entire life in the US, was registered to vote and an active voter, was active politically, and was never eligible to vote for president. Puerto Rico, y'all! Eating a moderate amount of ice cream while dieting actually helps a little bit, despite the extra sugar and fats it contains. It's called the ice cream effect and it's not publicized for obvious reasons despite dietitians knowing about it for decades. They've tried many ways to kill the phenomenon with better studies, but it persists. TLDR, eating some ice cream helps dieters lose a little more weight and get healthier than those who don't have any. Ancient sailors were always talking about sea monsters, usually ones with tentacles. The most likely explanation for these tentacled sea monsters is whale dicks. Some species of whales have males gather around a female and take turns with her. The waiting males often drift around upside down just under the surface. The only part of them sticking out of the water is a penis that's several meters long and looks like a pink tentacle. I once had a housemate who was born in the 1700s, and I am not quite 50 years old yet. It's true. When I was a baby, my great-grandfather briefly lived with us. I'm my family's genealogist. I learned from a census record in England that my great-grandfather had lived in the same house as his great-grandfather and was born in 1797. Crocodiles have hardly evolved in the past 60 million years because you can improve on perfection. Chickens are the closest relatives to dinosaurs. All the animals that developed intelligence are on the same side of the evolution tree. Except octopi, and we don't know why. The bromeliad's viper actually lays its eggs in the mouth of its partner. It's the only reptile that engages in oral sex as part of its reproductive cycle. It sometimes whips its partner on its backside while they are copulating. Syracuse University football has more alumni in the Pro Football Hall of Fame than schools such as LSU, FSU, Georgia, Florida, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Penn State, Tennessee, and Texas. Alabama also has 8 Hall of Famers. The moon is over 17 nautical miles away from the Earth. If you took apart a human body and stacked all of the organic cells end to end pointed towards a moon, you would have a dead eviscerated human. Tellurium-nuclear fusion bombs are infinitely scalable. As long as you can keep the reaction together long enough and have enough material, you can generate explosions at whatever yield you want. Ponderosa pine bark smells like ice cream. Mostly vanilla, sometimes strawberry, and seldom chocolate. We used to go around the woods back home, smelling trees and yelling what flavors we found. Human embryos pass through a phase to develop gill slits like our ocean-born ancestors. But we found different things to do with the old school take on ocean life, since we now live on land. If you line up all of the planets in our solar system end to end, they would be able to fit in the space between the Earth and the Moon with enough space left over to include Pluto. Civil rights in the USA are less than 60 years old. My mother was born without equal rights. Just a gentle reminder for people who keep claiming it's all in the distant past. Mike the headless chicken survived for 18 months with its head cut off. The owner took it on tour and fed it by dropping food and water directly into its esophagus. The city of Paris took the rats to court in the Middle Ages for causing the plague, and thanks to a brilliant public defense attorney, the rats won the case. The highest peak of Mount Everest was first measured at exactly 29,000 feet but was instead reported as 29,002 feet to avoid the impression of an estimate. The Jonestown mass suicide victims didn't drink the Kool-Aid, as the expression goes, that was Flavor Aid. Jalen Rose was the first Jalen. His mother named him after combining 2 family member names, James and Lenny. All other Jalens came after him. If you have the hiccups, tell someone, and have them ask you to prove that you have the hiccups. you will immediately cease having the hiccups. 100 of the energy from the sun that hits the Earth is released back into space, mostly at a lower energy state. Saw a Veritasium vid once. Some pine trees drop pine cones 10 pounds. Colder pine tree named Widowmaker. There are nearly as many different hands of 7 cards you can draw from a 52 card deck as there is atoms in the entire universe. For every snake in the world, there is one snake deck. Now that sounds right at first. Then it doesn't. It's true though. Some women pay for yoni steaming. Essentially, they sit over a vat of steaming water for alleged detox benefits. Jesus Christ was not that man's name. But it still holds the same power as God does in regards to combating evil. There have been more prime ministers of Israel born in Belarus than there have been prime ministers of Belarus. That if you knock your tooth out and put it back in the socket it will grow roots back and save the tooth. There is a disease called Kuru that was spread by cannibals eating the brains of those who died of Kuru. Jack Black's mother worked for NASA and created the technology that saved the Apollo 13 astronauts. When the Great Pyramids of Egypt were being built there were still woolly mammoths walking around. There was a time in 18th century England that playing the bagpipes was punishable by death. There are, unfortunately, no recorded cases of pirates forcing people to walk the plank. When the Aztec Empire was founded, Oxford University in England was already 300 years old. In nearly every professional baseball field, home plate is west of the pitcher's mound. Some blind people can see. The eyes work but the brain can't interpret the info. Your skin doesn't have a specific sense organ to let you know if it's wet or not. At the rate humans shed skin, it basically means we are the ship of Theseus. By volume, the largest manufacturer of tires in the world is the Lego company. Voting for a different dementia patient doesn't fix your country's problems. Your foot is the same length as the distance between your elbow and wrist. This question gets asked on Ask Credit approximately 97 times a week. Women weren't allowed to establish credit in their own name until 1974. You are 10 times more likely to get bit by a New Yorker than a shark. More people get killed by vending machines than sharks every year. Barack Obama was born in the United States but John McCain was not. The star Betelgeuse formed well after the dinosaurs went extinct. You can sail on a direct line from New York to Perth, Australia. Sharks are older than trees, by about 5,100 million years. There are 5.26 popes per square mile in the Vatican City. Narcolepsy is often mistaken for insomnia or depression. It only takes 8 pounds of pressure to rip off a human ear. Apples at the grocery store can be up to a year old.